ladies and gentlemen, Falcon here, and today we're going to be jumping right into the fray of learning while talking about the powerhouse that is the Archon. While some prefer high DPS, others healing, and yet even others prefer to tank, the Archon only cares about buffing its allies and debuffing its foes. Through other trees, an Archon can be used for backup heals or throwing out extra DPS when needed. As a quick side note, the Archon's buffs and debuffs do not stack with all of the Warrior's Beastmaster and the Rogue's Bard's buffs and debuffs. We're going to be breaking this guide into two parts. This guide will be covering the Archon's abilities plus the talents that modify them, the passive talent tree, which I will only be skimming over because I'm pretty sure people can figure out 1% extra damage is, well, 1% extra damage. It's not eldritch science here. And lastly, we will talk about the last few tidbits of knowledge that I can pass on to others. And the second part will be going more into the numbers and strategy, along with other such doodads. Now, the reason for this is I don't want the video to be too long, and I feel if I give a point to one, there's some people who might want to know kind of what everything does. And then there's some of you who are going to just want to see the more strategetic part of it and kind of a bit more of the discussion on how things work, placements, other ways to help improve your Archoniness. Yeah, that's a word. But yeah, so that's why there's going to be two parts. So, shall we get started? When we start talking about Archons, one of the first things we should discuss is the Archon auras. These buffs are extremely powerful in themselves, however, they do debuff the mage by draining his or her power to put these up. They also all last 5 minutes. So, let's discuss auras. Please note that tooltips show non-modified stat increases. Shared Vigor increases your raid's endurance by 70 while reducing yours by 59. Vitality of Stone increases your raid's 4 primary stats by 70 and reduces yours by 54. Arcane Aegis increases your raid's resistance by 65 and armor by 2000, reducing yours by the same. Last, we have Burning Purpose. This aura reduces your raid's cast time and auto attack time by 7% while increasing yours by the same amount. On top of this, anytime you cast a debuff, you deal around 1000 damage to the target. Your auras are great on their own, but with the right talents, your auras can be even better. So let's discuss these talents. Favorite Ally increases your radius of your Archon auras and reduces the cast time by 100%. And Aura Mastery decreases your aura's global cooldown. 2 points into Ultrist, pronunciation possibly wrong, reduces your mana cost by 6% per aura up. Speed in Numbers decreases the cast time of your spells by 4% per aura up. Power in Numbers increases healing and damage done by 6% per aura up. And lastly, Wellspring decreases the amount of damage you take by 4% per aura up. Get the pattern? Now, all this makes your auras extremely important, but using 4 global cooldowns to do nothing but reapply these would be a pain. But that's okay, because your 41-point talent allows you to instantly refresh your auras, this talent being Patron's Rage. And if you have time to stand around, it does a pretty decent amount of damage, not great, but decent, over a 6-second time span. Now, keeping your auras up is quite straining on you, but no need to fear. We have a way to get back all those stats that you'll be losing while keeping them up by applying a few various debuffs to your enemies. So let's jump right into these. Shared Vigor is countered by Searing Vitality. This attack, or self-buff as it's listed, does a small amount of fire damage and places Searing Vitality to you, increasing your endurance by 14 per stack with up to 5 stacks. Now, Blood Pact modifies Searing Vitality to allow this to stack up to 7 times. Vitality of Stone is countered by Pillaging Stone, which debuffs the target, reducing their strength, dexterity, wisdom, and intellect by 61 and dealing a decent amount of damage on a 2-second cast time. It is modified by Strengthened Stone. which places a buff on you and increases your strength, dexterity, wisdom, and intellect by 24% of the amount debuffed on the target, and this stacks 5 times. It also increases the amount of stats your allies gain by 30%. The Archon Aegis debuff is countered by Ashen Defense and Crumbling Resistance. The former increases the amount of physical damage the target takes by 5% for 5 minutes, while increasing your armor by 689 for 1 hour. Crumbling Resistance increases the target's non-physical damage taken by 7% and increases your resistance by 45. Now, Ashen Defense does not get to be modified, but Crumbling Resistance does by Empowered Aegis, which increases the resistance bonus you get by 30% and increases your damage done by 6%. Now, the last order we have to talk about is Burning Purpose. It's countered by Lingering Dust, which debuffs the target by increasing their cast time and their auto attack time by 25% for 20 seconds. It reduces your cast time and auto attack delay by 10%. Good lord, that is a lot of stuff to talk about. But luckily, when you hit level 58, you do not have to worry so much about all these buffs, because you get your root ability Archon's Bulwark, which is a mage armor that increases your primary stats by 80, damage dealt by 6%, armor by 1k, all resistance by 75, and reduces your cast time by 10%, and does not stack with your other self buffs. Now you might note that Fortitude is not included in this, so you must still apply Searing Vitality to get your extra health back. And because it's not like I haven't rambled on enough, I might as well do it a bit more. Let's go ahead and quit talking about auras, because while they're important, they're not the only thing you have to focus on. Let's talk about your various combat buffs, excluding those that we've already spoken about. Earthen Barrage increases your party's crit by 5% for 30 seconds. Earthen Shards increases the percent to 7% when both points are put in. Surging Flare reduces your party's cast time by 3% for 6 seconds. Volcanic Bomb increases your raid's damage by 5% for 30 seconds. Spark Shower increases your raid's movement speed by 15% for 30 seconds. Granite Salvo increases your raid's spell power and attack power by 225 for 15 seconds. Flowing Stand reduces the target's movement speed by 30% and increases yours by 50% for 15 seconds. It is modified by Swirling Sand, which reduces the cooldown of your Flowing Sand by 10 seconds. Waning Power reduces the target's AP and SP by 5%, attack power and spell power, and increases yours by 10% for 15 seconds. Last, we have Lava Field. This is a targeted spell that deals damage to the enemy in it and increases up to 10 raid members' damage done by 15% over 6 seconds. Now, when we get into the strategy bit, I'll discuss a bit further how this works, but for right now, let's move on. So let's talk about Illuminate. It causes additional damage when the debuff target is hit for 20 seconds and can only be triggered once every 3 seconds. This ability's damage output scales off your raid size. So obviously having 5 party members or having 20 raid members is going to definitely decrease and increase the amount of damage it does. Now then, let's see, this leaves us utility and charge consumers. And I'm not really going to talk about the mana regen because that stuff's kind of boring. So utility. I lump Cleansing Flames into utility because I don't agree that it's quite healing, but whatever. It's a spammable cleanse that removes 1 curse, disease, poison from up to 10 raid members in a targeted area. So it's pretty damn useful, on top of the fact that putting points into Purging Flames allows it to remove 1 buff from 10 enemies in a targeted area. Pretty spiffy if I do say so myself. Point to Point places a totem at your location and an ally's location, and gives an extra ability button that allows you to port between the 2 totems. When you teleport back, or after a short duration, the ability is put on a 1-minute cooldown, and the totem lasts a total of 5 minutes. So, charge abilities. You have 2 of these if you're just playing Archon. But don't worry, the first of which being Power Drain. This reduces the damage of the target deals by 10% and increases your damage done by 10% as well. Charge cannot be gained while this is active. The second one being Flaring Power, which increases your raid's AP and SP, attack power and spell power, by 15% for 30 seconds. While this does eat up a bit of charge, it does not go fast enough that you'll run out, and you can easily keep it up by spamming your abilities. Now there are about 5 talents left that I did not mention, because they're flat, simple logic, but for the sake of doing so, because someone will call me out for it, I know it, you do get a total of 5% increase to damage, 1.5% mana returns on crits, 5% crit chance, 10% ignored non-physical damage, and 12% spell power. There. Happy guy who would complain? Now I mention this as well, only because I think it's pretty good. If you put 5 points into Soulfire, you get 5% extra damage, but you also get another 5% from putting points into Archon, so if you're sub-treeing, sub-lighting, I don't know. If you're putting the points into a tree, this is always a good option. Now, it's arguable that you could put points into Harbinger for the 10% spell power, I believe it is, and then also 5% damage done. That pretty much wraps up that. And a pretty good tangent. So, ladies and gents, this concludes this part of the guide. I know it was long and a bit boring, but hey, I figured it is important to go over what things are. Next video, we're going to be going over what they do and how they interact with other such fun mechanics. So, if the video is up, you'll see a little annotation up to the right. If it's not, well, feel free to subscribe, and sooner or later, it'll pop up in your sub box. But either way, most importantly, guys, have a great day.